last video of the week. Yay! I don't know about you all, but I'm excited. So we want to jump right back in and get this kind of finished for the week. I want us to look at question 1. That was one that was in your journal. It says, is the giver treated well by the community, and support your answer? And I'm going to be using some background knowledge here. And I'm going to say that no, the giver is not treated well in the community. And the reason that I say that is they are making just this one person carry all of this pain and all of this hurtful knowledge by himself. That they're not willing to take on any of that themselves. Does he have a better place to live? Does he have nicer furniture? Yes. But at what expense is he taking that on? So in my opinion, he is not treated very well in the community. Your number 3 was a multiple choice. And it says, which of the following describes how the giver feels about his memories of Rosemary? And it's C. Forlorn means some sadness. So you can tell that he is saddened by the idea of Rosemary. Let me blow this candle out. And that is a great loss for him. So forlorn is the one that best fits. Now, our vocabulary from yesterday was that fill in the blank. So for number 1, it says, Valerie let out an anguished cry when she fell off her skateboard and banged her knee on the curb. Number 2, the football team's defense eventually crumbled under the relentless attack of the opposing team's offense. 3, we tentatively stepped into the frozen pond, unsure whether the ice would hold our weight. And 4, Lisa told her sister that it was inappropriate to go out in the rain without a raincoat. So those are the questions or the vocabulary that we were looking at. So end in mind, cause and effect relationships. Those are the big things that we are listening for and that we're thinking of. So 182. And let me get this chair. I feel like I'm just moving all over the place this week. I'm trying to break new shoes in and they're breaking me in. All right. Well, Jonas glanced at the clock. There was so much work to be done always that he and the giver seldom simply sat and talked the way they just had. I'm sorry that I wasted so much time with my questions, Jonas said. I was only asking about release because my father is releasing a new child today, a twin. He has to select one and release the other. They do it by weight. Jonas glanced at the clock. Actually, I suppose he's already finished. I think it was this morning. And the giver's face took on a solemn look. I wish they wouldn't do that, he said quietly, almost to himself. Well, they can't have 2 identical people around. Think how confusing it would be, Jonas chuckled. I wish I could watch, he added as an afterthought. He liked the thought of seeing his father perform the ceremony and making the little twin clean and comfy. His father was such a gentle man. You can watch, the giver said. No, Jonas told him. They never let children watch. It's very private. Jonas, the giver told him. I know that you read your training instructions very carefully. Don't you remember that you are allowed to ask anyone anything? And Jonas nodded. Yes, but Jonas, when you and I have finished our time together, you will be the new receiver. You can read the books. You'll have the memories. You have access to everything. It's part of your training. If you want to watch a release, you have simply to ask. And Jonas shrugged. Well, maybe I will then, but it's too late for this one. I'm sure it was this morning. The giver told him there something he had not known. All private ceremonies are recorded. They're in the Hall of Closed Records. Do you want to see this morning's release? Well, Jonas hesitated. He was afraid that his father wouldn't like it if he watched something so private. I think you should, the giver said firmly. Well, all right then, Jonas said. Tell me how. And the giver rose from his chair and went to the speaker on the wall and clicked the switch from off to on. The voice spoke immediately. Yes, receiver, how may I help you? I would like to see this morning's release of the twin. One moment, receiver. Thank you for your instructions. Well, Jonas watched the video screen above the row of switches. Its blank face began to flicker with zigzag lines, and then some numbers appeared, followed by the date and time. He was astonished and delighted that this was available to him, and surprised that he had not known. But suddenly he could see a small windowless room, empty except for a bed, a table, and some equipment on it. Jonas recognized a scale. He had seen them before when he had done volunteer hours at the nurturing center, and a cupboard. He could see pale carpeting on the floor. Well, it's just an ordinary room, he commented. I thought maybe they'd have it in the auditorium so that everybody could come. All the old go to ceremonies of release, but I suppose that when it's just a newborn, they don't. Shh, the giver said, his eyes on the screen. Jonas's father, wearing his nurturing uniform, entered the room, cradling a tiny new child wrapped in a soft blanket in his arms. A uniformed woman followed through the door, carrying a second new child wrapped in a similar blanket. That's my father, Jonas found himself whispering, as if he might wake the little ones if he spoke aloud. And the other nurturer is his assistant. She's still in training, but she'll be finished soon. The two nurturers unwrapped the blankets and laid the identical newborns on the bed. And they were naked, and Jonas could see that they were males. He watched fascinated as his father gently lifted one and then the other to the scale and weighed them. And he heard his father laugh. Good, his father said to the woman. I thought for a moment that they might both be exactly the same. Then we'd have a problem. But this one, he handed one after rewrapping it to his assistant, is 6 pounds even. So you can clean him up and dress him and take him over to the center. The woman took the new child and left through the door she had entered. And Jonas watched as his father bent over the squirming new child on the bed. And you, little guy, you're only 5 pounds 10 ounces, a shrimp. That's the special voice he uses with Gabriel, Jonas remarked, smiling. Watch, the giver said. Well, now he cleans them up and makes him comfy, Jonas told him. He told me. Be quiet, Jonas, the giver commanded in a strange voice. Watch. Obediently, Jonas concentrated on the screen, waiting for what would happen next. He was especially curious about the ceremony part. And his father turned and opened the cupboard, and he took out a syringe and a small bottle. And very carefully, he inserted the needle into the bottle and began to fill the syringe with a clear liquid. Jonas winced sympathetically. He had forgotten that new children had to get shots. He hated shots himself, though he knew that they were necessary. To his surprise, his father began very carefully to direct the needle into the top of the new child's forehead, puncturing the place where the fragile skin pulsed. The newborn squirmed and wailed faintly. Why, Shh, the giver said sharply. But his father was talking, and Jonas realized that he was hearing the answer to the question he'd started to ask. Still in the special voice, his father was saying, I know, it hurts, little guy, but I have to use a vein, and the veins in your arms are still too teeny-weeny. And he pushed the plunger very slowly, injecting the liquid into the scalp vein until the syringe was empty. All done. Now that wasn't so bad, was it? And Jonas heard his father say cheerfully, and he turned aside and dropped the syringe into a waste receptacle. Now he cleans him up and makes him comfy, Jonas said to himself, aware that the giver didn't want to talk during the little ceremony. As he continued to watch, the new child, no longer crying, moved his arms and legs in a jerking motion. Then he went limp. His head fell to the side, his eyes half open. Then he was still. With an odd, shocked feeling, Jonas recognized the gestures and postures and expressions. They were familiar. He had seen them before, but he couldn't remember where. Jonas stared at the screen, waiting for something to happen, but nothing did, and the little twin lay motionless. His father was putting things away and folding the blanket, closing the cupboard. Once again, as he had on the playing field, he felt the choking sensation. Once again, he saw the face of the light-haired, bloodied soldier as life left his eyes. The memory came back. He killed it. My father killed it, Jonas said to himself, stunned at what he was realizing, and he continued to stare at the screen numbly. His father tidied the room. Then he picked up a small carton that lay waiting on the floor, and he set it on the bed and lifted the limp body into it, and he placed the lid on tightly. He picked up the carton and carried it to the other side of the room, and he opened a small door in the wall, and Jonas could see darkness behind the door. It seemed to be the same sort of chute into which trash was deposited at school. His father loaded the carton containing the body into the chute and gave it a shove. "Bye-bye, little guy," Jonas heard his father say before he left the room, and then the screen went blank. The giver turned to him. Quite calmly he related, "When the speaker notified me that Rosemary had applied for release, they turned on the tape to show me the process. There she was, my last glimpse of that beautiful child, waiting. They brought in the syringe and asked her to roll up her sleeve. You suggested, Jonas, that perhaps she wasn't brave? I don't know about bravery, what it is or what it means. I do know that I sat here numb with horror, watched with helplessness, as I listened to Rosemary, as Rosemary told them that she would prefer to inject herself. Then she did so. I didn't watch. I looked away, and the giver turned to him. Well, there you are, Jonas. You were wondering about release?" he said in a bitter voice. Jonas felt a ripping sensation inside him, the feeling of terrible pain, clawing its forward to emerge in a cry. So let's think about this end in mind, and then we're going to talk about this whole scenario. The giver shows Jonas the record of that morning's release. Why? What's the cause? The effect is he showed the release to Jonas. But what's the cause of it? The cause is he wants Jonas to know the truth about what was taking place with that little twin. That little twin was not being sent away to another community to live and to grow and be nurtured. He wanted Jonas to realize that the release that his father was talking about was actually murder. That through this whole thing, that release is killing. And that's why he wanted Jonas to know. He's wanting him to have a good idea of what this community is capable of. Now, I cannot fathom that because this is a piece of science fiction. We need to remember it. It has a different way of life than what we experience. So it's horrific in so many ways. But think about the release at the nursing home. Remember that at the beginning of the book. So not only are they releasing identical twins, but in the house of the old, there is that release as well. Something to think about. This is a good place for us to stop today. And it is our Friday. So if we were in school, we would probably have an assembly program, or by the time we did concessions and things like that, we almost always lose about 15 minutes. So this is where we stop. I'll see you guys back in a couple of days. Love you. Miss you. Bye.